China has said America is waging an information war against it by accusing Beijing of spying with high-altitude balloons. The Pentagon says the balloon it shot down Saturday over the Carolina coast was part of a large surveillance program. China contends it was just a weather balloon, but US officials say it belonged to an aerial observation network spanning 5 continents.
These are the soggy remains of what is alleged to be a powerful Chinese spy craft. US defence teams here pulling the remnants from the sea off the South Carolina coast for further inspection. And the Pentagon doesn't believe this balloon was an isolated incident. US and NATO officials have met to discuss what comes next.
China engaged in this irresponsible action, a violation of our sovereignty and territorial integrity and international law. And as we've noted as well, we're not alone in this. Countries across 5 continents have also had surveillance balloons overfly their territory, which is why we're sharing this information with others.
We have also seen increased Chinese intelligence activities in Europe. Again, different platforms. They use satellites, they use cyber, and as we've seen of the United States, also balloons.
The discovery of the balloon and its subsequent shooting down have worsened Washington's already tense relations with China. The US has briefed 40 countries on the situation, with Australia responding by pulling Chinese-made security cameras from some government buildings, like this war memorial, to ensure that they are completely secure. China insists the balloon was simply monitoring the weather before veering off course.
It is unacceptable for the US to attack China's civilian airships, and it is irresponsible. Sensationalizing the so-called China threat doesn't help improve bilateral trust, nor does it make the US more secure.
As the United States mops up from the balloon fallout, President Joe Biden is stressing relations between the 2 countries have not taken a hit. Amid growing global tensions, the White House seemingly still hopeful of salvaging ties with Beijing.
And for more, let's go to Professor Michael Clarke. He's a specialist for defence and foreign policy at King's College London, a spy program that spans at least 40 countries across 5 continents. What does that tell you?
Well, it's the United States just making clear to the world that China conducts a sort of a societal level spying process. It's on an industrial scale, and they just gather information from everywhere all the time as much as they can. And this spy balloon it was a stunt. It wasn't a meteorological balloon. It wasn't a serious spying balloon. It was a gesture that the Chinese were making, and they lost control of it, lost control of the stunt, lost control of the political message they were trying to send for all sorts of interesting reasons.
And what about the politics since? China's response to the accusations, its denials? What does that tell you?
Oh, it always goes through this process. So first of all, they tried to get away with it by saying it's a meteorological balloon. Nobody believed that, and will not believe it, I don't think. And then they go into wolf warrior diplomacy mode, which is to threaten all sorts of things, to say this is disgraceful, and the fact that you brought down a balloon that was flying over your airspace illegally was somehow completely unacceptable, and there will be consequences. They always say this. China always feels it has to respond in a very vigorous way to everything. They take no prisoners. They will make no concessions, even when they're in the wrong, which they obviously and completely were in this particular case. So it has damaged American-Chinese relations, probably not irreparably. It's a spat. It's not a crisis. But the visit that Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, was due to make to Beijing the following day, that's now gone on into cold storage. I'm sure it will take place at some point. But China needed that visit more than America. So China has hurt itself by letting this stunt go wrong, and they'll have to sort of sweep up the debris from that.
Michael, is there anything in any of this that has surprised you?
It did surprise me that they would be so foolish, the Chinese would be so foolish, as to fly a balloon over the continental United States at 60,000 feet. I mean, balloons operate normally from 60,000 up to about 150, 160,000 feet. And higher altitude balloons can do quite a lot of good, and they're quite difficult to detect on radar. But at 60,000 feet, this balloon could be seen from the ground with the naked eye. And so they clearly intended it to be seen because they were playing games. It was a gesture. I was surprised by that because it was such a foolish thing to do. And it convinces us, again, people in the West tend to assume that because we think China always plays for the long term and is very cunning and careful and they calculate everything. It's not true. They're just as stupid as the rest of us. They make the same stupid mistakes as we make. And this was something that I think the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, probably thought was a good idea. I think probably the Central Committee didn't know about it. And suddenly they discovered that in the middle of the preparations for the Blinken visit, which were very important to China, they suddenly had this stunt, which somebody had thought was a good idea a couple of weeks ago, was getting in the way. And they've done themselves no good at all.
Well, it's also interesting to see how the White House has been responding and how that response has evolved in the days since. Let's have a little listen in.
It certainly doesn't, this incident, and the fact that Secretary Blinken had to postpone his trip, it doesn't help get the relationship back on to the solid footing that we hoped it would.
I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world, but make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
Have relations now between the U.S. and China taken a big hit, frankly?
No.
OK, that's interesting, the Biden administration trying to calm attitudes towards China somewhat. What do you make of that?
Yes, I mean, the Biden administration wants to make it clear this is a spat. It will pass, and we've got our broader relationship with China to think about. And again, they don't want Beijing to go over the top on this. But Biden was issuing some strong words. They weren't directed at China. They were directed at the Republicans in Congress. Because remember, when this balloon was first discovered, the Republicans sort of hyperventilated about it. They went into a sort of hysterical overdrive, saying this is gathering surveillance. You've got to shoot it down now. And there are all sorts of reasons why it wasn't a clever idea to shoot it down until it was over the sea. And when they shot it down into shallow water so they could recover the contents pretty well intact because it fell over water, not on the land. And I guarantee that Chinese balloon was not picking up any useful intelligence whatsoever, because the Americans, as soon as it appeared on the continent of the United States, they were flying above it with U-2 aircraft. They were flying below it with Raptor F-22s and some other surveillance aircraft. I can guarantee, I don't know, but I would stake my reputation on the fact that they were blocking any Chinese attempts to gather stuff from the ground, and they were probably scamming getting stuff from it as they did so. So I think the Americans will have got a lot more out of this in intelligence terms than the Chinese, who got nothing.
Michael Clark from King's College London, thank you very much for your analysis on that extremely interesting topic.